Hello, hello, hello. How are you all doing today? Thank you for being here. Of all the places that you could be, I am so glad that you are here with me today. My name is Barb, and welcome to my true crime episode. Today's story is about Louis Mackerley. He was born on February 15th, 1977, near Stanhope, New Jersey. His family moved to Allentown, Pennsylvania in June of 1983, just a year before he unfortunately disappeared. Louis was a happy, energetic, uninhibited, as far as attaching himself to strangers, that is, 7-year-old boy who loved to be outside, which is where he was the last time that he was seen. At the same time, he was described as a loner and a timid child. He did not like to sleep alone, and he had a short attention span. He had trouble writing and paying attention when he was, I was going to say when he was in school, but apparently he had that trouble all the time. In the fall of 1984, he was supposed to be entering into a learning disabled class, and he had currently been a first grader at Central Elementary School at the time of his disappearance. So, 7-year-old Louis had been missing from Allentown, Pennsylvania since June 7th of 1984. Louis had come home from school that day at 2:15 p.m. His aunt was there to babysit him and his siblings, as his mother was in the hospital recovering from surgery and his father was at work. Louis told his aunt that he was going to go walk to a friend's house to play, which was in the 300 block of Chew Street, not far from where he lived. His parents later believed he was going to 391 Chew Street to an elderly neighbor's house he liked to visit with. Several witnesses confirmed seeing Louis walking between 4th and Gordon Street, just a block from his home in the 360 block of Chew Street. When Louis left the house, he was wearing a short-sleeved green striped shirt, long blue pants with a red tag on the rear pocket that read Doggy, and an elastic belt and a buckle shaped like a train, pink socks, and brown shoes. Quite the colorful little fellow he was that day. His missing poster describes him as a white male with blonde-brown hair and blue eyes. At the time of his disappearance, he was missing his 4 front teeth, and he had 2 odd-shaped circular burn scars on the right side of his chest. He walks slowly and often leans forward as he does walk. When he speaks, he puts his hands on his hips. He was 4 foot tall and weighed about 44 pounds. He has learning and emotional disabilities, and he was diagnosed with hyperactivity and must take medicine 2 times a day of Ritalin to control his condition. If he does not take the medicine, he may suffer from lapses of memory. Never heard of that before. Louis was one of the first missing kids to be put on milk cartons, matchbooks, grocery bags, and billboards. That's something that, they should still do that. I'm sure it cost a lot of money back in the day to do it, and that's probably why they don't do it anymore, but the amount of people that go missing, I think they should bring that back. But anyway, Louis reportedly went to a local hot dog stand about 4:00 p.m. that day, and the owner of Marco's Doggy Shop, located at 429 Gordon Street, stated that Louis had spent about 45 minutes there looking around the store, and he told the owner he was in the store because 2 teenage boys were chasing him. He said Louis left the hot dog stand about 4:45 p.m., walking east when he left. Authorities later located the teenage boys and interviewed them, and they were not considered suspects in his disappearance. Another witness later came forward and claimed they had seen Louis talking to an unknown man and woman in a park near Jordan Creek, 1 block from his home, at about 4:30 p.m. This story wasn't confirmed, but it has not been ruled out by law enforcement. The timeline is slightly off if Louis was actually at Marco's hot dog stand until 4:45. There was one news article I seen that said there were reports of Louis getting into a blue station wagon with the couple, and Louis did love playing near water, especially at Jordan Creek and Lehigh River. He had also said how he wanted to visit Dorney Park, so all these places were checked, but there were no signs of him anywhere. Now, I'm not exactly sure when his parents got home that day or exactly when they found out that Louis never came home, but they didn't report him missing until 11:10 p.m. that night. They said Louis liked to stay out late and he usually returned home around 9:30 p.m. That's awfully young to be out that late, but that was a different time back then too. Once he reportedly left the house early one morning and accidentally locked himself out of the house, so his parents installed a lock on the door to prevent the situation from happening again. I'm not sure what that has to do with that. And how did he lock himself out of the house? Where was everybody? Like, couldn't he have knocked on the door to get back in? Or was he home alone? Several rumors were going around during this time that his parents were abusing and neglecting him. Social services investigated the allegations and found no truth to these allegations. Louis's parents were ruled out as suspects after each of them took lie detector tests and passed. Now, back in January of 1984, Louis reportedly told his parents and a school nurse and a psychologist that he had been molested by a couple, a man named Frank and a woman named Elizabeth. So back when somebody said they seen him being picked up by a man and a woman. He allegedly said he was molested on the railroad tracks near Jordan Street and Lehigh River. He also said that another incident happened where Frank and Elizabeth allegedly drove him to an apartment somewhere in Allentown and molested him there before taking him back to his neighborhood. He said Frank and Elizabeth told him that if he ever told anybody about the molestation, that they would hurt him. The Allentown police were notified of the incidents, but they didn't have enough evidence for an investigation because Louis could not provide police with the couple's last names or the address where they took him to. It was never confirmed if the alleged abuse had anything to do with Louis's disappearance or not, but Louis did disappear 6 months after the allegations. Louis's family moved just 11 months after his disappearance. They moved to another house on Chew Street, the house that he used to like to enjoy visiting where the elderly neighbor lived. The older woman that used to live there was transferred to a retirement home. His family wanted to move to a place he knew in case he returned. But despite his parents receiving contributions from the community, they could not continue to pay the mortgage payments on the house, and they filed for bankruptcy, and they moved to Effort, Pennsylvania in 1989. I'm not sure exactly why they moved, if they lost the original home that they had lived in as well. It did seem like they were a little financially unstable. But anyway, there was a man named David Riggs who claimed that he was a private investigator from New York, and he stated that he started an organization called Search 7 in order to find Louis and other missing children, stating that Louis was going to be his first case. Riggs claimed expertise in child abduction cases based on his graduate degree in sociology and his work with runaway children in New York City. He theorized Louis was abducted for financial reasons. It was found out that Riggs had approached 5 young boys and he offered to pay them to pose while wearing bikini underwear. Thankfully, none of these boys accepted the offer, and he was later arrested in West Virginia in 1988. He pleaded guilty and was convicted on 2 counts of attempted child abduction and 1 count of sexual abuse related to the incidences. He was sentenced to 1 year in prison, and the investigators thought Riggs was involved in Lewis's abduction, but they didn't have any evidence, and he was later ruled out as a suspect. Original tips pointed to a cult in Ohio where nothing was found. And investigators discovered that Riggs' organization had never been registered as a nonprofit, and he did not have a private investigator's license. There was an article, or that ticks me off, that people take advantage of other people. There was an article originally printed in the Morning Call newspaper on July 24th, 1988. It was later updated on October 2nd of 2021, and it read, "On a cold night about a week after New Year's Eve in 1985, an old Dodge Monaco with the back window knocked out rumbled down the driveway of the secluded McCall estate in Saucon Valley." Now that I'm from the area. Saucon Valley is not that far from Gordon Street where Louis lived. It's maybe 15, 20 minutes, depending on how fast you drive. The 3 men in the car were looking for Louis Mackerley, 7-year-old boy from Allentown who had mysteriously disappeared from a neighborhood near Sacred Heart Hospital on June 7, 1984. According to a tip from an unidentified woman, the Mackerly boy was taken to the abandoned, crumbling estate, once the home of a prominent Bethlehem Steel executive. There, he was beaten and killed when his head struck a fireplace. The boy was then tossed into a well on the property. The tipster claimed David Riggs, the New York City hunter of missing children who got the tip, was convinced that he would find the missing child at the bottom of a well on the property, according to the men who were with him. Harold Mackerly, the missing boy's father, and Clyde Barrow, a family friend, said the trio went to the estate in Riggs' car and checked out the grounds, several outbuildings, and the old McCall mansion for signs that the boy had been there. Now I'm going to pause right there, because who was this mysterious woman who made this claim? And this David Riggs, yeah, he has a different name than this man and woman in the beginning of the story that supposedly molested him. But is it possible that this David Riggs is that guy, and this mysterious woman who made this outrageous claim could be that couple? I don't know. I just find it very strange. So anyway, there were no signs that Louis had been at this mansion. They found a well, but Clyde Barrow said it was unlikely that the boy was in it because its heavy concrete cover couldn't possibly have been removed without heavy equipment. Although the midnight foray, one of the several rigs, would lead into the eerie confines of the old estate, proved fruitless. David Riggs' aggressive investigative style shocked Harold Mackerly. When Riggs couldn't find a way into a farmhouse on the property, Howard recalled he kicked in a window the way that cops on TV break down a locked door. Whatever he made his mind up to, he was going to do. This guy sounds like a whack job, actually. There was no stopping him. A ragged, unkempt person who some say lived in his car, Riggs had never been popular with Allentown police and FBI investigators handling the Mackerly case. While there was some concern about his background, law enforcement authorities saw him as a pushy, offbeat amateur who tended toward bizarre theories like the one involving the McCall estate. Yeah, I don't The guy just sounds like a whack job. In November of 1984, when Riggs telephoned, hold on, getting ahead of myself here. Sheila Mackerly, Lewis's mother, was first contacted by David Riggs in November of 1984 when he telephoned her from New York saying he specialized in finding missing children and he would like to help her find her son Louis. The Mackerleys agreed to see Riggs, who reported to represent Search 7, which he said was a New York-based organization that searched for missing kids. The Mackerleys say that Riggs told them he had reason to believe their son was kidnapped and sold to a ring of child pornographers. He said he would use guerrilla tactics to find the boy and indicated he could devote his full attention to the case, unlike police who had other cases to work on. You know, he sounds to me like one of those guys who, he was the person who committed the crime, but let's put myself in the situation to make it look like I'm helping. That's what this whack job sounds like. The couple had misgivings about his ragged appearance, which made him look like anything but a private detective specializing in finding missing kids. But after several agonizing months of waiting and hoping and praying for the return of their missing son, the Allentown couple were desperate enough to try just about anything. He acted like a man who knew the streets, and the Mackerleys thought maybe he could do more than the police. Although they did not pay him any money, the Mackerleys did sign a contract with Riggs, and he agreed to work without a fee, but said he would claim the $10,000 reward that he had put up, or that had been put up, by a family friend. $5,000 for the boy's return, and $5,000 upon the conviction of the abductor. For the Mackerleys, their association with Riggs turned out to be one of the most painful chapters of the 4-year saga that followed the disappearance of their youngest son. It was 4 years at that time. Mackerly said he took us on a roller coaster ride. He'd get our hopes up and then dash them down. They said that Riggs would call them and say, "I know where Louis is. I'll have him back tomorrow." And then they wouldn't hear from him for weeks at a time. A former Allentown police detective who handled the case for years said Riggs was picked up by Allentown police for following a young woman he suspected of abducting the boy. The woman did not file charges when the detective explained who Riggs was. I would have. In another instance, Riggs insisted a Whitehall woman was the mysterious Elizabeth who had allegedly molested the boy prior to his disappearance. But no one is quite sure how Riggs came to suspect this Whitehall woman of being Elizabeth, but he convinced Allentown police to search the woman's house. She was then taken to the township police headquarters where police videotaped her questioning. He swore up and down that she was involved, but it turned out to be totally off the wall. Do you think? Apparently there were kids in the house that he was accusing her of being abducted, but they were there because she was babysitting them. Dennis Lacey of Whitehall, a friend of the Mackerleys who was with Riggs, said police told them to leave the estate. They left, but Riggs insisted on going back to check out what he thought were bloodstains on the mansion's floor. I don't know. An investigation by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, the nation's clearinghouse for information on missing children, turned up information that Riggs was not registered as a private investigator. Riggs became indignant when the center turned down his request for names and addresses of the parents of 94 stranger abducted children in its files in May of 1987. Although the children's names and the date they were abducted are public information, parental information is confidential. Somehow, Riggs apparently got the parents' names and sent out letters on Search 7 stationery. The letters, which asked for information, asked for information about the missing children, led parents to believe that Riggs was connected with the National Center and was working on a research project for Columbia University. I'm telling you, this guy's a whack job. The center received complaints from dozens of parents across the country. Subsequently, a bulletin was sent to parents and police departments around the country indicating Riggs was not associated with the center and had gotten no information from its files. A resume that Riggs gave to the Morning Call in 1984 portrayed him as an academic who had an in-depth knowledge of social problems, particularly those of the delinquent youth. It indicated he had a master's degree in sociology from Columbia in 1982, and that was confirmed to be true. I'm surprised. A renowned sociologist from Columbia recalled that Riggs had been a doctoral candidate in sociology, but had not completed the coursework. A spokesman for the Ohio State Prison at Lebanon said Riggs spent 3 years and 3 months in Ohio prisons on larceny charges. That doesn't surprise me. Prison records show Riggs was admitted to the Ohio State Reformatory in Mansfield on December 14, 1971, and transferred to Lebanon on September 1, 1972. He was paroled from Lebanon on March 12, 1975. His resume indicated involvement in several programs with homeless youth in Manhattan, and one program which explored the relationship between delinquency and creativity through music was listed as being supported by Remington Products Incorporated and several other major corporations. Remington's chief executive officer and president recalled receiving a letter from Riggs soliciting funds. He said he contributed $300, but didn't recall giving Riggs permission to use his name on a resume. Now, Barry Berger, whom Riggs listed on his resume, said Riggs helped his son and several other troubled youngsters to straighten out their lives. With Riggs' help, the boys formed a rock band and attempted to make recordings back in 1983. All the boys have since straightened out their lives, and all but one was in college. The one man said, "My son had a drug problem, and Dave helped him out of it." After 4 years of dead-end leads, Sheila Mackerly had learned not to get her hopes up. While the FBI thinks it's worth talking to Riggs, she is not counting on learning anything at this point. Mrs. Mackerly knows how complex David Riggs is. She has thought a lot about Riggs, trying to make some sense out of his complex character. She tried to understand how he could look like a street person and be working on a doctorate at Columbia, and how he could be so well-spoken and articulate and yet so misleading. How could he be a convicted criminal and yet have such empathy for the homeless kids who inhabit Manhattan's alleys? And she has tried to understand how the man who promised to bring her son back to her could now be accused of attempting to abduct other children. "I don't know which way to go on this one," she said. "My feelings are up and down. In a lot of ways right now, I hope it's him, that he might tell us something that would help us find my son and bring him back. On the other hand, I hope to God it's not him, that we didn't hire my son's kidnapper. If that's the case, we'll never get him back." I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Now, the officer who, or the investigator who worked this case, he said, "This case is near and dear to my heart. The important thing is, even after 41 years, this case and thoughts of Louis stay revived even as time goes by. I'm always hopeful, and that may not be a pragmatic statement. I'm always hopeful that someday, somewhere, and perhaps under a different name, a 48-year-old man will step in and say, 'I was abducted by and raised by these strangers, but I'm really Louis Mackerley, who was picked up in Allentown back on June 7th, 1984. Now, back in the 80s, one of the radio stations did an interview with Louis's mother, and she said, "We'll make it. I don't know how. I don't know." Now, there was one article that I did see that there was a boy that was picked up 4 separate times by police. I guess somebody thinking that this boy was Louis. And the father had to show the police his birth certificate to prove that it wasn't him. And then there was another instance where police took Louis's mother to observe a boy at Pottsville School, and she determined that it was not Louis. Now, Louis had a brother named Harold, and Harold said, "Anniversaries are never easy, especially the day his little brother vanished right off the street." He's quoted as saying, every day, not a day that goes by that I don't think about him." He said after Louis first disappeared, the police would get called that Louis was in Allentown somewhere playing, and it would turn out to be Harold because they look so much alike. Harold stated he is very bitter about the way police treated his parents. He said the cops literally for like the first 3 years were useless before they finally said maybe somebody outside the family actually did do something. He said the kidnapping changed his family forever. Family vacations stopped. They no longer went anywhere or did anything because back then there were no cell phones, so they always had to be near a phone. The apartment building they had those windows out front, the rounded ones. Now I'm guessing he means like a bay window. His mom would watch him actually go into another person's house and would still make him call to let them know that he was inside safe and sound. Now, not that long ago, on October 11th, 2025, the Morning Call newspaper did an article on Louis, and the Lehigh County Sheriff, Joe Hanna, states he keeps a picture of 7-year-old Louis Mackerley. He said the case for him is unfinished business, that there is no investigator worth their salt that doesn't have an unsolved case that bothers them, that they carry on their shoulders, and this one is it for him. Over the years, a number of detectives have worked this case. The newest detective who got the case said, even with the passage of time, he holds hope that new leads and fresh information will come in and the case will be solved. He said he plans to go back through the records meticulously, and he hopes to reignite interest in the case, perhaps prompting new witnesses to step forward, and that technology advances over the last 40 years could play a significant role in solving the mystery. Johanna also said after all these years, he still often thinks of Louis Mackerley. He has so many things he would like to say to him if he's still alive, starting with, "Welcome home, Louis." Now, unfortunately, Louis's parents have both passed away, not ever getting any answers. I wasn't able to find an obituary for his father, Harold. However, I did find one for his mother, Sheila. And it reads, "Sheila Mackerly, 66 years of Northampton, passed away Tuesday, September 25th, 2018, in Lehigh Valley Hospital. She was the loving wife of the late Harold B. Mackerly, and they celebrated 50 years together, which was 45 years of marriage together. It says she was a simple-minded woman who often enjoyed playing several card games and other fun games with her friends. Most of all, she was a very caring and loving mother and grandmother. It's stated she is survived by her 3 sons, Harold, Edward, and Louis, and daughter Sheila." I hope she's survived by him. I hope he's out there somewhere. I personally feel that it was that couple that abducted him. I don't know what your thoughts are, but I hope you enjoyed the story. Do me a favor if you haven't already done so and subscribe to my channel. It would help me out dearly. I'd greatly appreciate it. And put your thoughts down below. Are you familiar with the case? Are you from the area? Do you know who Louis is? What are your thoughts on the couple? Do you think it could have possibly been them? And do you think that Riggs guy, was he just somebody taking advantage of these parents? Or do you think he possibly could have been the man that was the couple? That's kind of where my thoughts go. I don't know. But anyway, put your thoughts down below. I'd like to hear what you have to say. And until next time, I'll see you in the next one.